Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. I want to thank you for being with us. First, grandparents George and Cindy refused to answer questions under oath. They storm out of the room yelling, cursing out the lawyers. But in their effort to saturate the jury pool with their version of events, the Anthonys appear just hours ago on CBS. The Oprah Winfrey Show says, let's call the whole thing off. We learn a private voicemail message emerges to police from grandmother Cindy, implicating daughter Casey in the disappearance of Kelly. We know grandfather George attempted suicide, but now grandmother Cindy says she also planned to take her own life. They both insist Top Mom will never take a plea deal. Why? They say she's innocent.
I don't think Casey would take a plea deal. You know, Casey's not going to admit for something that she hasn't done.
We're just going to have to wait and see what plays out. I don't believe that's going to happen with her.
Would you encourage her to do that?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Are you satisfied with the answers she gave you?
You know, I'd love to know more.
Like what?
I want to know what happened.
Have you had a chance to ask Casey why she didn't report Kaylee missing?
Yeah, she was afraid. I mean, that's the answer. She was afraid.
What was she afraid of?
She's, you know, I can't answer that right now.
But she told you she feared for what, her life, Kaylee's life, both?
She feared for all of our lives.
Know that my granddaughter's no longer here. That's hard.
Yeah. You think about her every single day?
Every single day.
Every single day. Every single day. I don't think it's possible for my daughter to hurt anyone.
We stand behind her. We know what kind of mother she was.
Straight out to Mark Williams, anchor and reporter, joining us from Orlando. Everyone, you just saw grandparents George and Cindy Anthony on CBS's The Early Show. Mark Williams, what did we learn?
Well, we learned a couple of things, Nancy. First off, the biggest bombshell of all that none of us knew until this morning. The biggest bombshell, Cindy Anthony finally revealing that she had contemplated taking her own life, committing suicide. But she then revealed that daughter Casey, when she first came home after Leonard Padilla bonded her out of jail, that they sat and they prayed together, and then Casey literally talked her out of it. But by the same token, there were a lot of suicide notes left behind.
Hold on, Mark Williams, before you go to the next point, the Anthonys appearing just hours ago on the CBS Morning Show. Let's take a listen to grandmother Cindy describing her own contemplation of suicide.
George and I are living the same nightmare, but I don't know, and I can't judge George for certain things that he's done. You know, I understand certain things. I understand his suicide attempt. A lot of people don't know. I was there too. I wrote suicide notes back into July and August. No one knows that.
You did?
Yes, I did. Because I couldn't bear not having Kaylee around and not knowing what happened to her. And I wanted, you know, I just didn't, you know, you get to a point when you miss someone so much that you think life's not worth living.
That's a preview. Grandparents George and Cindy talking with Maggie Rodriguez on tomorrow's CBS The Early Show. They taped quite a bit, and they had part of it this morning, and you'll hear the rest tomorrow morning on CBS's Morning Show. To Ellie Jostad, our chief editorial producer, there were a lot of questions they refused to answer. It's almost by cue. Maggie Rodriguez would ask a question, and then you could observe them physically pull back and look at their lawyer. They knew not to answer the questions. Explain, Ellie Jostad.
Right. One of the key questions they were asked, Cindy was asked about that 911 call where she said, it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. Now, as soon as she asked that question, Cindy looked at her attorney. Brad Conway jumped in and said, we can't discuss that. It's all going to come out at trial. And they also didn't want to talk about what questions Casey Anthony wouldn't answer. Cindy finally said, well, I do want to know more. I do want to know more. I want to know what happened, is how she responded.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Leonard Padilla, but didn't they have many, many days after Top Mom bonded out on all those theft charges before she was arrested for murder where they could have asked her anything they wanted to?
Well, the situation was such that George one time went in there and very angrily asked her. He wanted to know what happened to his granddaughter. And Casey's response to it was, start acting like a father and not a damn cop for once in your life. And that was the hardest put questions that George put that day. And Cindy and his friend Jim from up north actually hauled him physically out of the room. There was another time.
So they had the opportunity to ask these questions. They asked the questions. They didn't get answers. We're taking your calls live, but before I go to Deborah in New Jersey, take a listen to this.
Cindy, your first instinct when you called 911 was to say, quote, it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. When you take that plus all the evidence that prosecutors say they've gathered, it doesn't bode well for Casey.
You know, Maggie, those are issues that are going to come up at trial, and they're anxiously awaiting that. And there's been so much pre-trial publicity that's going to affect the ultimate outcome and her ability to get a fair trial. So the questions that have to do with the statements that they gave, they want to wait, and they want to tell the truth in front of a jury and let a jury decide.
I don't understand that. They're out telling their story, but certain select pieces of evidence they don't want to talk about. That's grandparents George and Cindy Anthony on the Early Show, CBS. There'll be more of that tomorrow morning. To Deborah in New Jersey. Hi, Deborah.
Hi. Congratulations, and you're a great mom, and you're a miracle worker. I have a question on Casey. How long is she going to be allowed to be in protective custody, since that's so unusual for anybody else?
Excellent question. Let's unleash the lawyers. Renee Rockwell out of Atlanta and famed defense attorney John Burris, San Francisco. Renee, why is she still in protective custody?
Because, Nancy, the sheriff is responsible for her safety, and he does not feel comfortable with her in general population. That's what I would imagine.
Burris, I can only think of 2 occasions where a defendant was actually killed. One was a serial killer out of Wisconsin, and the other was a priest that molested a ton of little boys, and he met one of them grown up behind bars. What's the likelihood she'd really meet foul play?
Well, I don't know what the likelihood is, but I think that the sheriff is being wise to make sure it does not happen. These are she has serious allegations. People do not like people who kill kids and abuse children, and so I can see what she'd be concerned
you're right,
about
John Burris and Renee Rockwell, because this time it's not her against a 2-year-old child.
Like the loss of sunlight